Welcome to Behind the Scenes. I am your host, Hector Montalvo. This show is dedicated to asking tough questions for you, the viewers. We bring you their responses, and we let you decide. Joining us here today at our NCTV studios, we're happy to be joined by no other than Lawrence City Council member, Mr. Marc LaPlante. Mr. LaPlante, welcome to the show.
Hi, Hector. Welcome. Glad to be on.
Thank you. Mr. LaPlante, you are a returning member to the City Council. What made you come back?
The city's got a lot of issues and a lot of needs. And so while I had a great time and enjoyed my years of service from 97 to 2001, it became a time in my life again where the need was great, and I thought I could contribute in some way. So I was happy to throw my hat into the ring and to help the people out that are in my neighborhood.
You came back at a good time because the city of Lawrence is facing a lot of different issues, and especially the budget. Should the people of Lawrence expect cuts to be made to their services in the city of Lawrence? Well,
right now we are in some very tough economic times. The FY 2011 budget was a very austere budget. We had to do a number of different cuts throughout the city hall, and so the expectation, after listening to the overseer recently, is that there may be even more cuts in the offing. And then we've also heard as well that for the next fiscal year, that the state aid that we're expecting to receive, that state aid is expected to dwindle at least by $1 million. And so as we look at our budget as a whole, we realize that we're heavily dependent on state aid to operate our city. Just to give you an example, about 66% of our budget comes from state aid. 100% of that goes to the school department, school side. On the city side, about $30 million goes toward operations. So if you start cutting on the city side, let's say $1 million, already factoring in what we've already considered in the city, we're talking about some serious cuts and serious challenges that we'd be facing as a city.
Now, it's interesting because public safety has taken a huge hit, fire department, police department, but you recently brought forward legislation, or maybe not legislation, but you were trying to bring something forward to get a commitment from the mayor's office not to cut public safety. Why did you bring that forward?
There are certain elements that are core functions of government. When you wake up in the morning and you want to brush your teeth, you want to make sure the water's working. When you flush a toilet, you want to make sure that sewer is going out to the right place. Other core functions include police and fire. When you make that call to 911, when there is action going on, that's criminal activity, you want to make sure that you get responses. And if there's a fire or another kind of emergency going on, you want to make sure that that phone call is going to be dealt with quickly. So when we're talking about core functions, specifically fire and police, public safety, we cannot afford any more cuts. We have taken 3 years of cuts in public safety. I will say this one thing about the fire department. Thankfully, we received a $6.6 million grant that's beginning to be implemented now. That's going to return our fire department back to reasonable levels for the next 2 years. On the police side, there's been no such grant. We're 50 police officers down from 2 years ago, 40 police officers down from last year. And so now what we're saying is this: we need to draw a line in the sand. Chief John Romero has done an outstanding job with our police department. He instituted two things. One is CompStat, which is taking trends and being able to apply resourcefully our police officers in places where there's going to be action and try to deter that from happening. But even more importantly, he was also to create task force, the drug unit, the gang unit, auto theft, auto insurance, burglary task force. These task forces worked on the underlying root of crime. And because of that, he was able to demonstrate over the course of 10 years a tremendous decrease in crime. These models were tremendously successful. When the last year's budget kicked in, what happens is we totally eviscerated all those special task forces. And what that meant was we had all our police officers back on patrol. What does that mean? They are responding to crime rather than working to try to deal with the underpinnings, the root of all the crime that's going on in the city. And so what we're saying is this, that the numbers have shot through the roof, whether it's 80% increase in homicides, whether it's 120% increase in car thefts, whether it's an 80% increase in aggravated assaults. All these things took place this fiscal year since we totally eviscerated those elements. And what I'm saying, and what I'm asking the council to do, is to join me in a letter to the mayor saying, enough is enough. We can't afford any of this, any more cuts to police and fire. We realize we're in some tough financial situations, but the last place we should be looking for more cuts is in the police department based on that information. The last point, Hector, on this is the following. We received a $35 million bond authorization last year, very controversial. A lot of that has been, about $24 million of that has been spent on paying for back monies that we voted as a city over the last 2 or 3 years. And right now, we've spent about $24 million of the bond authorizations. The concern here is that if we really don't want to tap more of that if we don't need to. But the concern is that the legislation, now that is now a law, states that if there's any imminent public safety crisis that's facing the city, we then can go ahead and a control board can come in and take over the city. So that's a factor. My concern is that we're trending toward that place where crime is becoming beyond the scope of what is acceptable in our city.
Now, when you brought this proposal over, did you have any support behind it? I believe that maybe one councilor may have supported you in that effort.
Yeah, yes. Directly, one city councilor did express her support, Councilor Grizel Silva. What I don't want to do is characterize that the other councilors are not in favor of public safety, but rather they have their reasons as to why they decided not to sign on to it, and they can explain those reasons themselves. But I thought that this is such an important issue that we needed to send a signal immediately, because once that budget is submitted by the mayor to the city council, we cannot add anything to the budget. All we can do is cut, and we're not going to be cutting police and fire. So the time to send the signal is now. And so, unfortunately, my fear is that with those cuts, we've essentially sent the opposite signal, that we weren't able or willing to take a stand on not having any more cuts, which then would send the signal that it is okay to go ahead with more police cuts. That's the concern that I think that we're facing right now.
Mr. LaPlante, what do you think needs to be done to restore public safety and public confidence back to the residents of Lawrence?
Yeah, we've talked about the need to go ahead and return those task force to do the work that they need to do. But keep in mind that that the budget being what it is, we have some restraints. So just holding steady right now is the very, very first and base level of what we need to do as a city. The other thing we need to do is we need to show our public safety officials the kind of confidence, the kind of support that they need to do their jobs. What's happening oftentimes is that some of our political leadership is not providing the kind of support that sends a signal to the bad guys saying, I'm behind the police department, they're doing their job, and we're going to not tolerate any kind of criminal behavior in our city. If we don't get those kinds of comments from our senior leadership and from elected officials, what's happening is that there seems to be an implicit nod that these things don't really make a difference, and that's the signal that goes out. So to answer your question, we can't have any more cuts. If anything, we should try to prioritize and see if we can build up that police department and fire. And secondly, we need to make sure that we support our men and women who are in the city of Lawrence, have a tremendously difficult challenge every day. Every day they have a tough time. So we need to support them as much as we can. If we can't support them, and we should monetarily, we should at least support their mission and be able to provide some backing for them.
What direction would you like to see the city of Lawrence take or head towards?
Well, the goal, of course, is to have a city that people can live and work and recreate and enjoy. And that's the kind of vision that we should all be working toward. Government is limited as to what we can do, but we need to at least do the core functions that I mentioned earlier, that we need to focus on those things. We need to, we have a city of 76,000 people. We're one of the few major cities in the Commonwealth that had any kind of increases in population. One of the things that we need to do is to create a city whereby we are expanding or having a middle class grow. We need for those individuals who are disadvantaged and people that are working through the system to be able to quote unquote graduate, get a job. By the way, I think we're at 17% or 19% unemployment, which is tremendously high, one of the highest, I think, in the entire Commonwealth. We need to make job growth. We need to get these people working. And then we need for them to, once they get the jobs, once they do get their education, we need for them to want to remain in the city because we need to grow the middle class. So as a goal as a city, what we need to try to do is work toward providing a city that has a cross-section. We need to have a very healthy, vibrant middle class, but we can't always disregard those of us who are less fortunate. We need to provide assistance if we can to them as well. But once they do, we need to make sure they stay in the city. One last example, Lawrence High School. There's a lot of good students that go to Lawrence High School. There's a lot of students who are achieving tremendous things that are going to Lawrence High School. They go out and they go to four-year colleges or maybe the community college. They do very well. They get decent jobs. But the concern is this. You can go back 10, 15 years. Out of the top 15%, 10% of those graduating in the graduating class, how many of those individuals have returned to Lawrence to be leaders, to grow, and to really try to be a part of the fabric? We need to have a city that's welcoming to those individuals who want to start a family, start their lives, get on the ground run, and then stay and build a community. And that's why, as I look at that example and that model, that just screams to me that we're not doing enough, because I don't believe that we're having enough for those individuals who are the achievers coming back to achieve in our city.
I just want to remind the viewers, you are watching Behind the Scenes. I am your host, Hector Montalvo. We're joined in studio today with no other than Lawrence City Council member, Mr. Marc LaPlante, discussing about issues that are affecting the residents of Lawrence. Mr. LaPlante, as you know, the mayor has been in the news with his battles between the police department and the fire department. Does Lawrence have any hope of bringing these fine men and women back to work in the city of Lawrence?
I always have hope that we can. On the fire side, the fire department side, we have and are bringing back many of those men and women that were laid off. And with that SAFER grant, which is thanks to the fire department and thanks to our congressional delegation, was so instrumental in getting the $6.6 million SAFER grant to our city to bring back our fire department. I'm confident right now for the next couple of years, and we'll deal with that third year when it comes. On the police side, there have been back and forth. There's been some attrition. We've lost some folks. We've brought some folks back. But the numbers, as I mentioned to you before, being 50 down, we're still scraping. Do I have hope that they can come back? I do have hope. We need to stabilize our economic situation first. We need to maybe be more aggressive in seeing if there's any other kinds of federal grants available. But I'm hopeful, and frankly, I can't think of a more important issue in our city than making sure that we bring back the men and women to our police department.
Can you tell us, are you working on anything in regards to housing, education, and crime, and how would they intertwine with one another? Yeah,
we touched upon this a little bit earlier. As we try to build a city that integrates the various elements and classes. To be a healthy, vibrant city, you need to have people who are taxpayers, who own their own homes. We need to have people who are contributing part of the middle class. And there needs to be a support system by which we can have people who are currently less privileged or facing some challenges to, I call it graduating, or move from that position to a place where they can once again be part of our middle class. Education is so important in making this happen. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Our MCAS scores are one of the worst in the state. We have underperforming schools. We have tremendous structures in our city. I mean, the high school in and of itself is a beautiful, beautiful building, and it's a great place to learn. We have tremendously dedicated teachers who are trying to do a very good job under sometimes very difficult situations. And we have some students who, despite the challenges and obstacles, are still succeeding and doing very well. But in aggregate, what we're facing here is still an underperforming school system. And so what we need to have a school system that's doing better. We need to have a housing stock. We need to have neighborhoods where people feel welcomed, where people feel like they can raise a family, where their kids can go out and play at night, where there's some safety, where that the buildings around them are looking good, that there's no dilapidation, that there's no safety issues. We need to make sure that, so when we're asking for people to move or to stay, that the neighborhoods are solid and are welcoming. Obviously we talked about crime to some extent, and they need to feel safe. And they need to make sure that if the public safety emergency comes around, that there's going to be resources there readily available to them. So for all those different things, and they're intertwined. To be able to grow the middle class, which I think is so important, you need to have all those factions together to make it happen. On the housing thing, one of the things that I would push, and I think that's important, is we have the carrots and the sticks. Regulatory areas for, we call inspectional services, where they are going ahead to make sure that the codes, the city laws, the state laws are adhered to. And that makes sure that the places are safe, that they look good, that there's no unhealthy situations that are there. So what we need to do is to make sure that we have a strong enforcement mechanism in place to essentially ensure that our neighborhoods and that our city appears good and are safe. And I think that what we need to do is put some resources toward inspectional services, and that way we will see a buttressing of enforcement, and they will pay for itself, because if there are violations taking place and those violations are ticketed, and I'm going to have to say fairly ticketed, we don't want any cowboys out there, but we need to make sure that they're ticketed fairly, then that's going to be revenue generating. The idea is not necessarily to generate revenue, but to change behavior and to change the way the situation, the way the appearance is. So we can make that change. Once again, that ties into the housing stock, that ties into the middle class, that ties into having a very viable and vibrant community.
It's interesting that you mentioned the cleanups of the city of Lawrence, how the city looks and so on. I know that in a lot of other states, New York for one, especially New York City, they have a transportation department that goes around and ticketed people, business owners and residents that have trash or did not pick up. Should that, we see a lot more of that in Lawrence as well? Would that generate, and also
having cameras in certain areas to catch the illegal dumping, which can make a tremendous impact, because if you go through parts of my city, you'll see places where there is just trash and garbage disposed over there, and it becomes cyclical. So what happens if they start seeing that, they start seeing graffiti, then there's a signal that it's okay. So if we start cleaning up initially, that helps. And if we can do the enforcement to make sure that doesn't happen in the first place, then what you're doing is you're seeing, rather than us using our resources to try to react to these things, then you're using our city resources. We talked about the state resources. You're talking about using those resources to be more proactive in doing things. Again, it's about having a vibrant, healthy community.
Now, in order to keep the city safe, I know that at one point the state police was brought in a few years back. Should that be something that should be considered, maybe the state police, the Essex Sheriff Department coming in and patrolling the city of Lawrence?
At this point, I will take whatever help we can get from any of those authorities. Keep in mind, the budget cuts that we're facing in Lawrence are also budget cuts that we're facing in the state. The resources that the state police had are dwindled as well. So we can't be relying too heavily on the state police, because they are being cut and they're being limited in what kind of assistance. But I welcome their assistance. I welcome their help. Once they work, and they do work collaboratively with our police department, and also bringing the sheriff's office in as well. If we can bring those resources to bear and that we make some progress, my hope is that our reliance on them will lessen, and then we can again be self-sufficient. Because it's almost embarrassing to say how much money that we're getting from the state. What we try to do is be more self-sufficient, more self-sustaining. Let's be honest, we're never going to be 100% away from any kind of aid, but I like to see that ratio be reduced so that when the state doesn't have a sneeze, we don't catch a cold.
It's very interesting as to what's going on. Do you see the middle class in Lawrence diminishing for some reason or another?
I do. I mean, we are slowly now receiving some of the federal census data that's coming in. Besides, of course, the increase in population. About a third of our population is below the poverty line, and that's a huge number. And that there are the pockets. The median income in our city is roughly for families is roughly 31,000. The state average is 61,000. So when you juxtapose those numbers as to what we're facing as a city, and the numbers are not looking to trend up because of all these things, they're trending down. That is a concern, that we're not doing all that we can to really save and grow the middle class in our city.
Now, do you see people in Lawrence engage in their government? Do you see them involved and demanding answers to the problems that Lawrence is facing? Or what would you like to see the people of Lawrence be more active? How do they get involved?
I do see seeds and sproutings of that kind of activism, and we do need that kind of activism. It's challenging because people are so caught up in their day-to-day lives, whether, like I mentioned, that high number for unemployment, whether they're looking for jobs. We have challenges with individuals who are maybe a single family who's trying to juggle all these balls, bringing their kids to school, trying to get a job, or working a job, coming back home, taking care of the house. The people in my city, many of them have so many other demands on their time that when it's time for them to focus on the things that deal with city government, it doesn't take a backseat because their immediate needs are so great and it's so time consuming. So I encourage more individuals to get involved in government, whether it can be running for a position and elected, it can be working on a board or a commission, or it's being a part of the participatory levels of government where you talk to your elected officials and make them aware of what your needs are, and more importantly, or as importantly, if you have a recommendation or solution, to offer those things and be a partner as to what we're trying to do. Because not any one of us, I can't deal with any of these issues singularly. I don't have a magic bullet. There are issues here that have been here for a long time. But what we're trying to do is try to make progress. And if we make progress, then we build hope. If we build hope, then we start seeing things trend in the right direction.
Just want to remind the viewers, if you have a question that you want us to ask your legal representations or your state government, send us an email at thehectormontalvoshow@yahoo.com. You can also visit our website at behindthescenes.weebly.com or join our Facebook at Behind the Scenes with Hector Montalvo. Mr. LaPlante, can you tell us some of the legislations that you are currently working on?
Well, I think the bulk of my focus right now, and I'd be happy to repeat it because it's so important, is to make sure that we have police and fire and that we're making sure that we have adequate levels of that. I'm a district councilor, so there are certain things that are unique to my area of the city. I represent South Lawrence East. In South Lawrence East, we include the Showcase Cinemas, we include Lawrence High School, we have South Union Street, which is a small section of commerce. We also have public housing with the stadium projects that's there. We have some middle-class housing in the Colonial Heights and on Greenfield Street, for example. So what we do have is a tremendous, I got a very varied and significant cross-section of the city right in my area. So my goal as being a district councilor is to respond to whatever those needs are. And as you can imagine, they're quite varied, whether it's things as mundane, if you will, as parking regulations to make sure that on South Union Street that we have the right amount of time for parking so that commerce can be made more easily, to the bigger picture issues that we talked about, dealing with public safety. Every city councilor, and I'm no exception, we're working on things like potholes, making sure that we're responsive to those kinds of issues. So there's a number of different things, both big and small, that I'm working on. Accountability is one of my biggest issues, to make sure that that the tough questions, kind of like you're asking me, the tough questions are being asked, that we get some sort of responsiveness, not only from my fellow colleagues, but also from the administration. And sometimes that doesn't bode very well, because sometimes when you ask tough questions, that doesn't come across as being very friendly, and there's people sometimes object to that. But I would like to have a lot of friends, but my goal here is not to have friends, but to represent the people that I have, the people in my district, and do the best job that I can for them. So with respect to various legislative proposals, there's a number of different things, whether it's trying to recoup money from utility companies that are digging up the roads for whether it's Bay State Gas or Verizon or whoever that's doing something, making sure that they have a bond in place so they can pay for the repayment of those things. Little things like that across the board that are small issues but important issues in the whole that I'm working on.
And you also have a website that people can go to.
Right.
What are some of the things that people can find on your website, and what's the website so those viewers could go into?
Website's my name. It's www.marclaplante. It's Mark with a C, LaPlante, LaPlante.com. It's I think one of the first people in the council actually to employ that. It is some work, but I do enjoy doing it and trying to keep it up fresh and updated as possible. I also have Facebook. If people look up the Lawrence City Council Marc LaPlante, they will be able to find my Facebook address in it, and there be able to put some information on there a little quicker. And then there's a better chance for dialogue as well. My email address, I welcome emails. People email me, and that's great. It's a great way to communicate. Again, it's my name. It's Marc LaPlante at rocketmail, ROCKET mail.com. And so I do that. And one of the other things that I'm very proud about is I was able to institute this during this term was an email address, a constant contact, where I sent information out to people, small surveys right before the city council meeting, where they're able to respond to me and give me their input on votes that I'm about to take. When I was on the city council last time, one of the more frustrating things was I would vote on an issue, and then I would hear from someone that said, Mark, why would you vote on this? Have you thought about X, Y, and Z? Have you considered that? And while I would listen to them, part of me was saying, where were you before I took the vote? I really could have used that input prior to it. What I'm doing now with this survey is getting that information before the vote. That way, when I do take a vote, it's more informed, and I'm able to, I think, represent my district better.
Well, we appreciate you coming in and being open and transparent with our viewers. Sure. We are seen on Comcast Channel 22 and Verizon Channel 33. And really quick, you also addressed your constituents via radio also, WCCM. Can you just tell us really quick what day the people can listen to you on?
Sure. I've actually a couple different places that I've been asked to go on. On CCM, Wednesday mornings at around 7:30, 7:35, I go on there every week. And on CAP as well. Usually I talk for a little while on Mike Sullivan's show at usually between 2 and 3 o'clock on Tuesdays.
Well, we want to thank you for coming in and addressing your constituents and the viewers. You have been watching Behind the Scenes. I am your host, Hector Montalvo. Join us next time as we go behind the scenes to ask the tough questions, bring you their responses. We let you decide. Thank you for joining us.